Watch out, Elon Musk. They are coming at you from all sides. But this one I kind of predicted would happen. Shareholders are now suing Elon Musk as well as the company Twitter, saying that the company's stock price was driven down by the mismanagement and handling of this merger deal. We're going to get into this. Plus, we got to talk about Russia now on the brink of default. What does that mean for Russia? And more importantly, what does it mean for the rest of the investing world? We will discuss. And so much for that hot housing market. New evidence suggesting it is starting to cool, which would make sense given that interest rates are going up. Welcome everyone to the Trish Regan Show. Good to have you here. A quick reminder that portions of today's program are brought to you by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals like gold and silver than right now. So go to legacypminvestments.com for more. Again, legacypminvestments.com. We'll talk a little bit more about the markets coming up. But first, I want to start on Twitter and Elon Musk and this new lawsuit, which was bound to happen. I mean, you've seen the stock price just tank ever since Elon started making all this noise. And I think shareholders may have a point here in terms of the mismanagement of this entire ordeal by the company. As for Elon, well, we'll see. I mean, he is protected under his First Amendment. He's allowed to say certain things. But when you are effectively having such an influence on the stock price, that's when it starts to get a little bit complicated. As my friend Carl Icahn would always say, I talked to him about stocks he was in, or companies, I should say, that he was buying or invested in. And he was extremely cautious about what could really be said. He'd say, get my lawyer, get my lawyer. And there'd always be a lawyer there to say, okay, yeah, can I say this? Can I say this? He'd say. Well, Elon never had that sort of gut check to say, hey, can I say this? And never seems to check with his lawyers. And he's very frank in ways that get him constantly into trouble. Look, I like the guy a ton. I think he's an absolute visionary, a brilliant guy. He's exactly what Twitter can use right now. But as a shareholder, I get it, right? I understand why they're concerned, because they've just watched the company's value literally plummet, right, in the span of however many weeks ever since he really started meddling in this. Anyway, he did announce that he was going to buy it for $54.20 a share. And then he said, wait a second, you know what? You got all these bots there. You get all these bots, and the bots are a problem, and that's not what I signed up for. So if you really have this many bots, then I can't possibly pay $54.20 a share or $44 billion. And he's saying the company's just not worth that. The problem is, and I've explained this before, it's a little bit like if your house is for sale, or say your house is not even for sale. Somebody just comes in off the street and says, you know what, I'm going to offer you this huge premium to what your house would normally trade at. And there's no contingencies, no financing contingencies. There's going to be no inspection. I don't care. I just want it as is. And you're like, okay. And you sign all the paperwork and all the contracts are done. And a few days later, the buyer comes back and says, you know what? I'm having some concerns about your air conditioning system. Or it seems like the wood on the left part of the house isn't as solid as I thought. And then you're like, but wait a second, we had a deal, right? Well, the problem is that's one thing. Like you're in the private space with your house, and a smart person would hold that person to the deal, or at least take the deposit that they put down and keep that for themselves, right? Well, that's in the private markets. Well, what happens in the public markets when all this is playing out on stage and it turns into one big, huge Twitter drama? Well, shareholders wind up losing money. And that's not cool, right? That's pretty upsetting to them. So there's now this proposed class action lawsuit that was just filed, and Twitter shareholders are alleging that Elon Musk violated California corporate laws on several fronts, and in doing so, engaged in market manipulation. So that's a pretty big charge. And they think that he did this because he wanted to get a lower price for Twitter. Don't forget, he bought it right around the time, didn't actually fully buy it, right? Proposed buying it right around the time that the NASDAQ kind of, was coming apart at the seams. And so that may have him thinking, I need to reassess whatever that is. I mean, he's going to have to pay $1 billion breakup fee if he walks away from this whole thing. But is this deal really going to go through? I just think it has to, right? How can he walk away? How can he say it's on hold? It's not on hold. And the company should have come forward and said, you know what, it's absolutely going forward. I mean, they had some kind of statement that they made, but perhaps it wasn't emphatic enough. This has been a total circus. And I'm sure the Twitter board is like, oh my gosh. And the bankers on both sides are like, oh my gosh. I know it's not easy, right? But this was bound to happen. I think when it's all said and done, I understand the company's probably not worth at this point $54.20 a share, which is by the way, why I said the board ought to take that deal. It was a heck of a deal, $54.20 a share. But how does he get out of this? I mean, we have laws, we have contracts. These things happen for a reason. You know, there's no material acquisition change, as they call it, a MAC, right? Is there any MAC here for the deal? Material acquisitional change. No, I mean, other than, I get it, you know, maybe there's more bots than you thought, but you signed up to do the deal sight unseen, right? No due diligence. You waived your right to all that, Elon. So I kind of think you're on the hook. And by the way, I'll be happy that you're on the hook only because I think it is a better thing for the company that Elon's in charge. Sure, I'd like him to get a great deal. I think he can make more of a success of the company with a better deal, but this is why you insist on due diligence before you buy a house and before you buy a company. All right, let's turn to Russia, which right now is truly on the brink of default. In fact, it could happen any minute. Russia has all this debt outstanding. Not a ton. I'm going to get to that in a second. I mean, I'm not worried that it's going to bring the whole system down or anything because it's not enough to do that. But it has a fair amount of outstanding debt, less than $1 trillion. But nonetheless, a significant amount of money it has to pay the interest on this debt, right? Just like you pay your credit card every single month, your interest payment. I mean, hopefully you pay more, but you got to at least pay the interest payment. Well, they call it a coupon on a sovereign bond. So they're international debt, you know, all these countries and banks and investors from all over the world have bought Russian bonds expecting a certain return regularly, you know, a certain percentage that they signed up for. Well, now they're not going to get that interest payment. They're not going to get that money, the coupon on the bond, because the U.S. Treasury Department has come out and said, you know what? We froze all the dollars, the $600 billion that Russia had stockpiled. We've frozen your dollar assets, and we're not going to let you pay in rubles. We're not going to allow those transactions in rubles. So how do they not default in that case? I mean, if you can't pay in rubles and you can't pay in dollars, you can't pay, right? Now, there will be people that say, oh, this isn't fair. It's the U.S., you know, being the U.S. And I'm going to take a step back here and just point out what I've told you before, and that's that I'm a big believer in using the financial tools that we have as opposed to military tools. Financial tools that can influence other countries' policy decisions, say whether or not to invade another nation, another sovereign nation. You know, if there's the threat of the U.S. cutting you off, maybe you think twice, right? Maybe China thinks twice about invading Taiwan, given that the U.S. does have the ability to say, you know, it's over. We will freeze your dollar assets. We will not accept yuan for payment, just like we won't accept rubles. So this should make other countries think twice. I mean, it will be a disaster for Russia if they default, and I suspect at this point increasingly it looks as though they will. It will be a disaster for generations. And I feel very bad for the people of Russia that will pay for this, that will really feel the economic hardship as a result of their leader and his surrounding cabinet members as a result of bad decisions and horror that was inflicted on another nation. It's not fair to the Russian people that won't be able to access the world economy, Right? Russia will be completely cut off. Who else is going to lend to a country that defaulted on its debt? It takes a long time for countries to get out of this. They defaulted in 1998, but that was a localized thing. It pertained to Russian debt within the country itself. This is the whole enchilada, right? Like, this is debt on an international stage. So internationally, they will not be able to pay their bills. And so how do you recover from that? It's very, very hard. It takes many decades, a generation or two. They have not done this in 100 years. You could go all the way back to the revolution back in 1917 to see Russia having defaulted on its debt. This is not a thing that countries should do, ever do, because the penalties are massive for many, many years to come. But again, I go back to the U.S. needs to stand up for what's right. And if we have the ability from a financial standpoint to say, it's not okay that you go and invade your neighbor and cause all this death and destruction, because if you do, you know what, your economic chances are really going to be dwindled overnight. I think that's a message that has to be sent. This is something that the prior administration actually did quite well. They were willing to use things like tariffs, anything within their financial arsenal, if you would, to help initiate certain changes in policy that would be to the betterment of the United States of America. So in this case, and it's a rare case where I ever applaud anything that this administration is doing, because it's been, in my view, pretty disastrous on so many levels. But in this case, this is the right thing to do. It is. All right, I want to turn to the hot housing market that's about to cool. But before I do, very quickly, I just want to mention again that if you're not diversified in this market, you really do need to be. And one of the best ways to diversify is to look into other assets, including things like gold and silver. I just think that that is one of the best possible ways to diversify for the long term. We saw in today's market that the gold continuous contract, it went up again. We saw that silver also went up about 0.7% at $22 there for silver. Again, this continuous contract. Gold and silver are some of those things. I mean, you can look at copper and some other commodities as well. I think there's many out there that are worth taking a look at. But gold and silver are things, especially gold for me, that can help you even out some of the fluctuations in your portfolio. I mean, I like gold because it's been around for thousands of years. And I just, in my own personal life, always try to have between 1% and 5% of my portfolio that's dedicated to gold. And that's for the long run, right? Like, I'm not touching that. It's just there to watch, like watching paint dry, right? You got your gold over there. But there's a lot of different ways to do this. You can invest in a gold-backed IRA. You can get the actual stuff yourself and keep it in your basement or keep it in your safe deposit box at your bank. And the company I trust to help do that is Legacy Precious Metals. Wonderful family-run business, great group of people, run by Charles, who's been on the program. You've probably seen him. Their number is 1-866-589-0560, 1-866-589-0560. So I encourage you to think about gold. I encourage you to give these guys a call. Of course, you can use my name. I encourage you to do that as well, because they know me and I know they'll take good care of you. So legacypminvestments.com is their website. They have a free guide on investing in gold and silver that you can download. Check them out. Before I get to markets, we got to go back to this housing thing, right? Because there's new data that's a little concerning, right? But natural. I mean, interest rates are going up. Do you really think housing prices can continue skyrocketing, given that it's going to cost that much more every month to pay your mortgage when you got a higher interest rate? Anyway, we have evidence that some of this housing may be in fact cooling. In fact, there's a lot of data that's just been trickling in for the month of April, and a couple of things really stood out to me. Number one, the homes listed for sale, that's rising again. You saw for a while there's absolutely no inventory. That's starting to shift. It's starting to shift because people are getting a little nervous. They're like, hey, if I actually do want to make a move, maybe I need to do it now, because this may be the best price I'm ever going to see for my house. And so they know interest rates are going up. They know that buyers will not be willing to pay as much if, say, mortgage rates are 8% instead of 3 or 4%, right? So you are starting to see more and more people put their homes on the markets. That naturally has a suppression effect, right, on prices. The other thing, and I thought this was interesting, and this comes from Redfin, which is reporting that 15% of home sellers in the month of April cut their asking price. Now that's significant because just 9% a year ago cut their asking price. So increasingly people are bringing their asking prices down. Now granted, there's still plenty of hotspots out there. I have heard all the stories about how you gotta buy now. A friend of mine just bought a place in Florida. Of course, everybody's going to Florida, right? Because of the very low tax situation. You have no state income tax. Anyway, they just bought a place in Florida. And she said, wow, like it's crazy. You've got to actually get it before it goes on the market. Once it's on the market, it's scooped up like that. There's all kinds of things happening. In my particular friend's case, do you know that she didn't even see the inside of the home? She saw another home that was similar, but didn't see the inside of the home. It never went on the market. She drove by it. Someone told her they'd be interested in selling, and by 9 o'clock that evening, she owned it. I mean, that's what's going on. This was down in Palm Beach. I mean, this is what's happening in some hot markets. But I think overall, that's gonna start to decelerate, if you would. The housing market, there's a new word for you, is about to decelerate. And, look, I love a good housing market only because it makes me feel better, right? I live in my house. I own my house. When it goes up, it feels great. When it goes down, it feels really bad. But what I like to say to people is forget about all that. Because you have to live somewhere. You have to live somewhere. And while it may make you feel good when it's going up and may make you feel bad when it's going down, reality is it's your home. And unless you're actually trying to trade out of it and hopefully trade to something cheaper, right? So you pocket a little bit of money, what are you going to do, right? It's where you live. Finally, I just want to touch on the stock market, which today went way up. I'm not buying it yet. I'm not buying this rally. Literally and also figuratively. I do still have a lot of concerns about the state of our economy, about the effect of higher interest rates, and what that is going to mean for earnings here as we move forward. I think a lot of people are looking for some kind of excuse to get back in. I like it when it's going down, to get in, that is, more than it's going up. I don't think we're out of the woods yet. I think you still need to be extremely cautious, and I would leave you with that. I also just want to say, you know what, we're coming up on Memorial Day weekend, and I'm actually going to be off the show tomorrow, but I'll be on social media, so you can talk to me there. You can also talk to me on Locals, trishregan.locals.com, and of course I'm on Twitter and Facebook and all those places, but I will be taking the day off tomorrow. And I just wanted to say, what an incredible nation we have, what incredible people we have, and thank you to all those families and to all those individuals who have sacrificed their lives, families who have lost their loved ones, defending this great nation. It is because of these true heroes that we enjoy the freedoms that we have. So thank you to them, to all of our veterans, all of our veterans. My father fought in Vietnam, and he's a proud vet, and there's so many of them out there. And I just wanted to say a very special thanks. This is an important weekend, and let's remember how much so many Americans have sacrificed so that we can enjoy the lives and the freedom that we have. Have a good weekend. Think about the importance of all of that, and I'll see you right back here on Monday.